We are now
All
live.
right. We are now live. All right, cool. Welcome, my lords, to the Well-Earned Comforts podcast. I'm Sam.
And I'm Seth.
Thank you for joining us on the Walls of Isengard as we explore the many works of Tolkien and discuss life. We're glad to have you as part of the fellowship, as there's no telling where we'll be swept off to. And man, we have been busy. It's been almost a month. It's over a month, I guess, now since we last podcasted. But we are so back, baby, and ready to talk some Tolkien, talk some seafaring ways of Aldarion and Erendis. But before then, like always, we're going to jump into some babbling like Butterbur. So I'll check in with my brother Seth. We're hat bros today.
I know.
Both of us wearing some hats there.
I was gonna say I normally wear a hat if I'm not at work. I mean, you're it's not normal seeing you in a hat, but I actually really like it. It's got I'll be honest, it's kind of a Boulder vibe the way it's made.
Hey.
It looks like you're straight out of Boulder, Colorado, but I do like it. I do like it.
Yeah, it's not bad. I haven't gotten a haircut in like a month and a half. Usually I get one every month, but I missed my one appointment and my barber is so busy. Like he literally, I was like, hey, when else can I come in? He's like, you can't.
You're not gonna.
It's like you can do walk-in Wednesdays, but I can't do Wednesdays. And so I was like, all right, whatever. So I'm waiting for the 6th. Okay. 6th is my next haircut.
Jeez.
It'll be back to the beautiful hair.
Hence the hat.
But I've noticed with it down. Yes, but I've noticed with it down, like I've looked in the mirror and I see a lot more gray hairs with it down than when I usually spike it up with my hair gel and stuff. And I'm like, ooh, that's not good.
You know, every time I get a haircut, every single time, I just see more and more gray falling on my lap. And it's just like, well, thanks, Dad. Although supposedly doesn't that go through the mother's I don't know. I haven't looked into that enough. Who knows? All I know is I'm going gray at 30. So almost 32 actually. But yeah, it's been busy for both of us. We've had a lot going on. Our son Benjamin is now today. Yeah, actually today he's officially 2 months old.
Let's go.
So it's been an adjustment. I will put it that way. It's been good, but I'll be honest, it's been harder to bond with the second kid because he just is a lot of effort with very little in return. Whereas I can just be like, all right, he's sleeping, I'll put him down and then go play with Evelyn, as opposed to like, all right, I should hold him. And, I've had to remind myself to spend intentional time with him as opposed to just meeting his needs. Oh, he has a diaper, he needs to eat, I can do all these things, whatever. And then calm him down and put him down and play with Evelyn. But it's a huge adjustment, but it really seems like we're finally starting to find our new normal. We're finally starting to be like, okay, this is our family. This is how it's hard to describe, but it just takes a while to normalize your new life, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm sure it will in probably a couple of weeks here. But how has Evelyn been, like, what's that transition been like for her? I know originally she was like, okay, let's take the baby back, like give it to grandma and let her take it home or whatever. But is she like bonded with him a little bit more?
She has. I actually have a little video of him in his swing staring at her while she sat next to him reading her VeggieTales Bible. And which great. She's 2.5 reading is just pointing at the pictures and then lecturing in unintelligible words, not unlike myself often, but it's really cute. She definitely still struggles with a little bit of jealousy and has a hard time when we are, attending to his needs, and she feels like she needs attention as well. But as a whole, she's become very nurturing. She gets all the diapers to help change it. She gets the wipes. She says, "Mama, baby, eat," when he starts crying, and she's learning. She's learning. It's a beautiful sight to see. Yeah. And actually yesterday, for the first time, she walked across his view and he just turned his head to follow her and just got this massive smile on his face. And he just started smiling consistently, probably a couple days, 3-4 days ago. And so it was the best. Oh, it is. It was so cool just to see him, like, he watched his big sister and then just smiled like, oh, this is awesome. I have a sister. So,
yeah. But how cool. About, I mean, I was just going to say, seeing like how our sister Sarah's kids interact, like the way Killian just wants to do everything that Ember does, his older sister. I wonder if that will be the same for you guys. That's cool.
I'm sure it will be. It's fun. It's finally starting to feel normal, which is a big relief. But what about
Absolutely.
Ariel? I saw her post a picture on Instagram. I think it was yesterday, maybe today. I don't remember, but of her 36 weeks, and it's like, man, it could literally be at any point. Hopefully, a couple more weeks for your baby's sake, but
Sure.
it could be at any point. You know.
Yeah, she's already 2 centimeters dilated, which, I mean, I don't know if that means necessarily anything. Baron came, or at least she started labor when she was only 3 centimeters, so, um, he was also 2 weeks early too, so, I mean, if we're going off of that math, it could be next week, which
Right.
is, yeah, next week and a half, but still, yeah, it's like, okay, like, today we spent most of the day. I have Fridays off, so we spent most of the day, like, going through all the baby clothes and setting up the bassinet and just getting the go bag kinda ready just in case, if anything
Yeah.
happens,
Yep.
but she's been a trooper. It's been a tough season, like, this past couple weeks. I got the flu for the first time in
Yep.
my adult life.
The
I don't
man
think I've
flu or
even
the
had a
real
fever.
flu? The man
No,
flu or
like,
the
the
real flu?
legitimate flu, like, I went and
Okay.
got tested, got Tamiflu and everything. I had 2.8 fever. It was almost 103 fever consistently for like 2 days, shivering like crazy. Weak. I mean, I couldn't do anything. Thankfully, it was flu A, so I wasn't like puking and all that crap. I mean, I think that's flu A or flu. I don't know. Flu A, flu B, whatever. Either way, like I felt terrible, and I've not had the flu or even a fever in my adult life. I don't think. And so this was tough because Ariel, of course, in her third trimester, wobbling around, and then Bear on top of that had
Oh yeah.
norovirus, and so he was puking every morning at 3 a.m. and then also had diarrhea every single day, and so I couldn't do anything. Ariel's trying to do everything, take care of me and him, and it was just she was a trooper through it. But then like we thought we were in the clear. A couple days later, Bear has an allergic reaction to his shots that he'd gotten on Friday. She brought
Oh.
him into church on Sunday, and he was like red, had hives, his ears were popping. Like Will Smith from Hitch when he gets
Yeah.
allergic to
Yeah.
like it looked like that. Honestly, not that bad. Obviously, that was like
Sure.
dramatized, but
Sure.
he was. I mean, he was swollen up, and so we took him to the urgent care and gave him some Benadryl and stuff. And but then turns out he had strep as well, and then so he we got him on antibiotics for that, and then Ariel got strep right after that. And so
Goodness
she's on
gracious.
antibiotics, he's on antibiotics, and I'm just like hoping, fingers crossed, she got tested on Wednesday. So I think I should be clear. I think I'm in the clear now, but it has been definitely like one thing after another for the last little bit here. But just hoping that, and on top of all that, too, Ariel's a little bit paranoid because there's been a measles outbreak
Yeah,
in
I've heard.
Frankfurt.
Yeah.
So I mean, we're all vaccinated and stuff, so I don't think it's gonna actually be an issue for us. But still, it's like,
Well, it's terrifying to bring a newborn into that as well.
yes, that's the biggest thing. Is she's like, well, we can't go anywhere. Like, yeah, I mean, we won't for a little bit, but
Yeah, and
yeah, I mean,
I will say I recommend following that because I don't know, about a week, maybe week and a half, 2 weeks into Benjamin's life, I got bored with Evie and decided to take her to a tumble time at the rec center, and she came back with RSV, and
oh gosh, yeah,
Ben started to get sick. Thankfully, he didn't spike too high of a fever, and we watched him very carefully,
yeah,
and thankfully it was a non-issue. But just for the sake of well, your child, of course, but also listening to your wife and those motherly instincts and the wisdom that comes with that, and not being like me and saying, oh, we'll be fine, it's not a big deal, Evelyn needs to get out of the house.
right.
Probably a good idea to listen to Ariel and not leave for a little
Sure.
bit, especially if there's a measles outbreak going on.
No, I mean that's really good wisdom for sure. We'll definitely hunker down for a little bit. I get a couple weeks of PTO, so probably won't be doing much. But it was fun. On Friday before Bear got strep, and I think this is where he got strep, honestly. But we went up to like the Newport Aquarium, which is like just on the other side of the river of Cincinnati, and so we went and looked at a bunch of fish. We just watched like Finding Nemo with him before, and so he was
Nice.
looking at all the fish, calling him Nemo, and they have some nice sand tiger sharks and sandbar sharks, a big old sea turtle there, and so he was just like, "Whoa!" And they actually have a really cool spot where you can walk over the biggest, like the shark tank where all the
Hmm.
sharks are. There's like a net you can walk over the water, and so you can see them swimming underneath. And that was a cool experience.
So it's not glass like at the Denver aquarium where you could look down and walk over the glass. It's like a net, so you're walking over just straight water.
Well, they had some of that where it's like the floor, you can look through the floor, but then you're legitimately like at the very top of the aquarium looking over like where they feed the fish and everything.
Sure.
That's a net that goes across the top, which is super neat. But
that's awesome.
But yeah, we're pretty sure that's where he got strep. But we wanted one little last adventure to with him, just really spoil him, and got mac and cheese afterwards and just had a good time. But that's probably plenty of babbling. I mean, I could keep talking about my family forever, but we're really excited. Ariel's really done with being pregnant, and probably next podcast, we will be toasting the new child.
The new child. I asked Amanda that today. I said, have you thought recently about how nice it is not to be pregnant now that you're like 2 months out? And she was like, it crosses my mind many times a day. And so I'm sure Ariel is just completely done. This last, hopefully not an entire month, but this last month is miserable.
Yeah, she's ready. He kicked her in the stomach just like 20 minutes ago. She goes, you'd have more room if you came out, right?
Yeah, break that water. Let's go. Let's make it happen.
All right. Well, we'll do a quick little segment of Riddles in the Dark here. We get our 3-in-1 Lord of the Rings copy and try to stump the other with some dialogue here. Try to figure out who's talking, the context, and maybe the chapter name as well. So I'll go first since I've already got something up.
Oh, okay. That's very quick. Let's see what you got.
The green smell, he said. It's better than much sleep. If I say the next 2 words, you'll get it. But
the green smell, it is better than much sleep.
Yep.
What in the world? Man, there's no way. There's no way I pull this out, but give me a second.
I was gonna say I can like skip over some stuff to give you some more context, but I know if I give you the next 2 words, you will get it immediately.
The green smell, green smell, green smell. All right, for good podcasting sake, I'll take another hint. I want to think about it because. All right, yeah. Give me another hint. That's impossible. Okay.
Light feet may run swiftly here, he said. More swiftly maybe than iron-shod orcs.
Yeah. Okay, that's kind of what I was thinking. This is Aragorn and the 3 hunters, and it's like the plains of Rohan. But when you were saying the green smell, does he smell the grass, or is this when they're under the? Because I was gonna guess the shelter of Fanghorn when they see maybe Sauron. That's what my first guess was gonna be, but I didn't remember them ever saying anything like that.
Yeah, that's a good guess. So I'll just give you
kind a little before that. Then
sentence before that. Here the air was softer and warmer and faintly scented, as if spring was already stirring and the sap was flowing against an herb and leaf. Legolas took a deep breath, like one that drinks a great draught after a thirst in barren places. The green smell, he said. So it is them on the grass of Rohan.
This is right
before they meet this is right before they meet the Riders of Rohan. But
okay, yeah, I knew I was close with that, but I was like, "There's no way it's all the way back there." So it's Legolas that says it. I was gonna guess Aragorn.
Yeah, then he says, "Let us run." And then Aragorn is the one that says, "Light feet may run swiftly here." And
right.
So yeah, good job.
Yeah, that was a really good one. Let's see.
Didn't give you much.
No, you didn't. I have to find one for you. I could give you this one, but there's no way you'd get the character. That's kind of mean.
Maybe. I mean,
all right. This is a decent one. The questions that you ask, Galdor, are bound together, said blank. I have not overlooked them, and they shall be answered.
Didn't we already have this last episode?
What?
You said Galdor, which is
Oh,
literally
no. You're thinking of Gildor. This is Galdor. Come on, kid.
Sorry.
You're thinking of Gildor. You're thinking of Gildor and Glorian of the House of Fenrod, right? That's the conversation we had last podcast.
Yeah. So this is Galdor.
If I do the next sentence, you'll know.
Let me see if I can guess who he said. Say it one more time.
The questions that you ask, Galdor, are bound together, said blank. I have not overlooked them, and they shall be answered.
I mean, that sounds like the way Gandalf would talk. No.
Any idea on the context? What setting this might be in? What chapter?
Is this Houses of Healing?
No.
No. Okay. Then no, I really don't know.
Okay. Let me just read the next little bit and you'll get it. The questions that you ask, Galdor, are bound together, said blank. I have not overlooked them, and they shall be answered. But these things it is the part of Gandalf to make clear, and I call upon him last, for it is the place of honor, and in this matter he has been the chief.
So this would be the Council of Elrond, I imagine, and that's correct. Elrond speaking.
Bingo.
Okay.
Nailed it.
Yeah. And okay.
There was
so actually, Galdor is.
I was gonna give you Galdor's quotes, but I was like, it's not fair to make him try to guess who Galdor is.
That would have been rude. You're right. Well, very good. That was fun. We both needed just a little bit of help, but we made it. We made it work.
Those were challenging ones.
Moving on to yes, indeed. Moving on to Tidings of the Fellowship. So I get a little. We got a shout out from our friend Scott Marion, who I mentioned last podcast. I was like, man, we need to hear your Tolkien story. Where are you at? And so he sent it in, and also thanked me for calling him out with a gentle rebuke. So, and this is I read this earlier, but this is kind of a funny Tolkien story because he doesn't seem to really even like Tolkien. I think he likes listening to us, which is great. I mean, it's very surprising. But he also left a 5-star review that I'll read after his Tidings of the Fellowship as well. But anyway, this is what our good friend, or my good friend rather, Scott Marion had to say about us, or his Tolkien story rather. He said, thanks for calling me out with the gentle rebuke to send in my Tolkien story. I first learned of Tolkien in 4th grade when I was reading C.S. Lewis's Chronicles of Narnia books. Great books, great series, always a good go-to.
Yep.
Around that same time, the high school was that I was a part of did a small play. They did The Hobbit for the school play. He said, I liked the Gollum character. Of all the characters, really, I'm very curious, like, how that actor, whoever this high schooler, played Gollum. Like, this was probably before, not to age a little bit, this was before the movies. Like, how did he do it?
Real quick, Sam, can you pull your mic away from your mouth just a little bit? It's just coming through kind of grainy. All right, there you go. Sweet.
Yeah, I'm very curious to see how that would have been. But he liked the Gollum character. He says, I tried to read The Hobbit after that, but only got a bit into it and did not finish as I was not connecting with it, which, okay, fair enough. After college, I read a few of his works, The Hobbit, The Fellowship of the Rings, The Return of the King, and The Adventures of Tom Bombadil. Skipped over Two Towers, bro? That's why you don't like it. You're missing an entire book. He says, I did enjoy The Adventures of Tom Bombadil, probably due to its brevity. Yeah, or brevité. I don't know how you pronounce it, but it is nice, short, and to the point writing that made it enjoyable. Also, I appreciate that Tolkien didn't use negative IT nerd descriptions when writing characters. Call back to a few other podcast listeners. Sorry about that. Again, still sorry. He's still bitter about it. Overall, I know it's good. It got me good. Overall, I know he's a great writer, but I find myself drifting way to my thoughts, reading his stories like a kid in school who can't wait for recess to start. I mean, when you take a page to describe a tree, sometimes, I mean, I get it. I get it.
Yeah, it's reasonable.
He said, I was excited about the movies, hoping they would help me enjoy the works that many people loved. I did enjoy them as they were fine, but they were so long and hard for me to love them or want to watch them again. I totally understand, especially now with kids. Like I just, it's hard to find time for such lengthy movies. But finally, he says, as you said, your guys' podcast is part of my Tolkien story. After your last episode concerning the Mariner's Wife, part 1, I will try to read The Mariner's Wife and Unfinished Tales. Listening to Seth and Sam talk about that story piqued my interest. So great. That's exactly what this podcast is for. Hopefully inviting people into works of Tolkien that they would not have experienced before. So love you, man. Thank you so much for your Tolkien story and for the subtle shots there. You are, I mean, you're not the IT nerd that we were talking about by any means. You're on day 1740 or something like that of running every single day. So definitely don't fall into that category in my opinion. But
yeah, no,
but then also
I was just gonna say props to you for tuning in. Like that genuinely means a lot for somebody that probably doesn't like what we even talk about that much to still find enjoyment in what we're doing. I mean, Sam and I, you know, this is not the most popular podcast in the world. It's still primarily just a time for us to dive into something that interests us and quite frankly get to spend some time together. It's a rare thing for us to get to do that. So it's fun to know that other people get enjoyment out of it, even if, you know, the actual content is maybe a little esoteric for your take, you know, your likes, but we just appreciate the continued support because you've probably been, aside from my mom's, you know, 12 burner accounts, you've been our most dedicated listener, I'm sure.
Yes. Yeah. Couldn't agree more. Absolutely. He went on to give us a 5-star review, which we're now up to 12 5-star reviews, 0 other reviews. So guys, we're perfect. It's great. But he says this podcast is a fun to listen to, brother, as the brothers share their joy and insights into the into the works of Tolkien. I enjoy listening to it while I'm out for a run, as it makes it feel like I'm having an enjoyable conversation with friends. Good. I'm so glad that it can take your mind away from the pain that you're feeling as you're running.
I don't even know if you feel pain running anymore at this point. Like you're Forrest Gump at this point, right? Like
yeah, right.
You just kept running and didn't stop, right? You just one day you started running and didn't stop.
That's right, man. Thanks, Scott. I really appreciate you, man. We also got a little, just a text update from our cousin Luke Linville, who just listened to the last couple episodes. He made the note that, you know, our Babbling Like Butterbur used to be about gym PRs and working out, and now it's about our kids, which is kind of crazy because, you know, the first time we podcasted, there were no extra brothers, children. I mean, obviously you guys had Evelyn on the way, but neither of us knew exactly what parenting was going to look like, and now that's all we talk about pretty much. So
isn't it crazy how your whole life just changes, everything about it? Like until I 100%. Saw Luke's message, I like that never even crossed my mind, but it's like, yeah, that's a good point. I don't think I've hit a PR since Evelyn was born. Like, which I know you have, but it's your deadlift, yeah. But like life is just so much different now, and it's obviously for the better. I mean, I wouldn't change it, but it's a whole turn. It's a complete turn that happens when you have children.
Yep, absolutely. Well, it is time, as we have tarried probably far too long, but it is time to jump into the meat and potatoes of our podcast. So I'll let Seth give us a little brief recap of our last episode, as it has been a month since we talked about The Mariner's Wife Part 1. Again, talking about Aldarion and Erendis, the love story that it is, one of Tolkien's not as successful love stories, as we'll get into. But yeah, Seth, why don't you take us away?
Yeah, so I just kind of wanted to spend a very brief period of time recapping because it has been so long. Our apologies. It is kind of crappy to be like, all right, we're going to do a read through and then you forget, you know, the last podcast. So if you need to go back and listen, feel free. But kind of the 30,000 foot view of what we discussed in the last episode focused primarily on Aldarion and how he's the heir to the throne of Númenor during the Second Age. Númenor is that island that was created by the Valar for the Edain, or the Three Houses of Men, that helped in the wars against Morgoth in the First Age. At the end of the First Age, beginning of the Second Age, they were gifted this island. They were gifted long life through the line of Elros, which is, we talked about Elrond a little bit previously in our Babbling Like Butterbur. That's his brother who decided to become mortal and be a king of men. So Second Age, Aldarion is an heir to this throne of these incredible men that are just known for long life and wisdom, and Númenor is like a utopia basically. And Aldarion's really known for his love of the sea and exploration. So the first episode, he founded the Guild of Venturers. He became known as the Great Captain among his men. He's very well respected, but he and his dad don't quite see eye to eye because his dad is very focused in on the land of Númenor and the responsibilities that come with being the heir to the king. Whereas Aldarion is a free spirit and wants to adventure out, and he loves the sea, and he's a mariner. However, he does meet this girl Erendis, and he falls in love with her, but he continues to really just show more interest in the venturing, and he's not wanting to settle down for marriage. He just doesn't want the responsibility of having to settle into and accepting his place as the king's heir. So basically where we left off is Aldarion. He decided to go out on his own and with his Guild of Venturers and go for another trip to Middle-earth. With that, the king declined and refused anybody of the house of Aldarion to place it's called the Green Bough of Return, which is like a wreath from this special tree in Númenor that always signified their love for Uinen, the Lady of the Sea, and it was like a good omen to get back home. And so unfortunately the king and Aldarion had gotten in a fight, and he refused to let his mother or anybody else come and place this bow of return on the ship, which was unheard of. It was a complete slight. And so where we left off was Erendis actually got it from Aldarion's mother and went and put it on the ship, and that little gesture kind of piqued Aldarion's interest even more, and he was gone a lot less time than he initially had planned, and with that he came back bearing an incredible diamond gift for Erendis, and his father rebuked him and basically said, like, this is not a gift that you give somebody just because. That is like a betrothal gift. So you need to figure it out. And so that's where we left off. So basically, King Meneldur continues to urge Aldarion to take thought of his place as heir and get married to Erendis. He starts pushing him. And as we learned in the first episode, which kind of like Turin, now that I think about it, right? Turin Turambar from the Children of Hurin. Anytime he's told to do something or is pressured to do something, he goes in the opposite direction, which that's like a lot of us men. I know that I have very much struggled with that in my own life. Like, you think you know what's best and I'll show you it's not. And then I get 10 feet down the other road and go, crap, I either need to swallow my pride or I just eat the consequences and keep pushing forward. Probably better to swallow my pride. There have been times I've done both. So I definitely get where Aldarion's coming from. Mm-hmm. So at this point, due to the king's urging and pressure, Aldarion just decides, all right, I'm going to leave again. I'm going to travel to Vinyalande, which was the haven in Middle Earth that was at the mouth of the Gwathlo. That this was a haven that Aldarion had in previous trips had established, and so he just decides to go out there. And Tolkien gives an explanation of Aldarion's thought process about this, and I think it really hits the nail on the head. He says, life on land was irksome for him, for aboard his ship he was subject to no other will, and the venturers who accompanied him knew only love and admiration for the great captain. So when he's on his ship, he's not the heir of the king. He is the king. He's the man. He's good at what he does. He's well respected and well loved by his men, and he's doing what his heart and his passions are. And so life on land was just irksome for him. So with that, it was an open rebellion for the king's wishes, and the king actually revoked Aldarion's authority as lord of the ships and havens of Númenor, and he forced the guild house to be shut while Aldarion was gone, and the shipyards of Romena, which is on the east portion of the Star Island, where a lot of the shipyards were, where Aldarion would build his ships, he forced those to be closed, and then he forbade anybody from shipbuilding or felling any trees for shipbuilding. So basically all the instructions that Aldarion had left for maintaining things while he was leaving for Middle Earth was just ripped away, and this is basically what Aldarion returns to. So he was gone for 5 years, and when he finally got back and saw all this, he was very, very angry about it. And so he was like, all right, I'm out again, and just decides, okay, I'm going to leave again, and without blessing or bow. And this time he was gone for such a long time that people actually feared for him. And even his father, Menildor, the king, began to be a little bit, I don't know what the right term would be. I don't know that he felt that he was in the wrong, but he started to worry about his son. And with that, he was actually gone for a total of 14 years. But at 10 years, Erendis, who was living with the king's family in Armenelos, in the city of the kings, she actually decided to depart and go back to the westlands of Amarie, where she was from, because she had just decided that either Aldarion had died. It's been 10 years. Either he's dead or he just decided, you know what, I'm over it. I'm staying in Middle Earth. And so he was gone for another 4 years, for a grand total of 14 years out at sea.
Which is just insane. And again, you remember that Aldarion is of the line of Elros, and he's a Númenorian. He's got long life. But Erendis is not. And so she's got, us normal.
Well, they still live
lives.
longer. They're just not, like, she'll still live far longer than us, but she's not going to live to 400 to 500 years like most of the Númenorian kings. Yeah.
Yeah. So 14 years, I mean, for Aldarion maybe isn't that much, but I mean, for Erendis is a good amount of time. So, but during this travel of when he's gone for 14 years and some of the delays that happened, as he was traveling to the far south of Harad on his way back to Vignalande, he was met with great storms and he actually barely escaped a shipwreck. And I kind of imagine this is part of the fun for him. Like, that's kind of like, I don't know, the adrenaline, the problem solving, that's just kind of a guy's thing. It's you kind of thrill seeking, I guess is the word or the term I'm thinking of. But when he actually finally got to Vignalande, he found it was overrun with hostile men, and so he tried to return to Númenor, but then was pushed back by strong winds from the west, and his ship was actually hit by lightning and dismasted. Which, again, you think of just all the crazy things that are happening, and you wonder too if maybe is Ase just having a good time, throwing things up? Is he stirring things up a little bit? But as Tolkien says, it was with labor and hardship in the deep waters did he come at last to the haven in Númenor. So he's battered, he is sea torn, and he gets to Númenor, and you think he's maybe a little relieved, but pretty much as soon as he gets there, his dad's just like, dude, what the heck? Yeah. Like he just immediately starts rebuking him. I mean, don't get me wrong, his dad was glad that he was back and got to restore kind of his titles and everything, but he was pretty upset with him. He rebukes him. And he actually claimed that in leaving, he forsook the guardianship of the Valor and risked the wrath of Ose. Again, like I just mentioned, maybe Ose was trying to teach him a lesson or something.
Or Ose is just doing what he does best, and Weenan kind of just took a step back and didn't protect his ships as much, potentially.
She was taking a nap, and he was just having fun.
He was just out causing chaos.
Yep. But Aldarion starts, all right, where's my girl at? He wants to he's looking around for Erendis and realizes, oh, she's went back home. She left Armenelos, and this displeased him. But for whatever reason, being the guy that he is, he was too proud to go and seek her. He didn't want to be outright with it. And he knew that it wasn't right to do that, to actually go and talk to her, go seek her at her own home if it wasn't with the intent of marriage. Yep. And he wasn't ready to commit to that yet. He was still, his heart was torn in two, between the sea, between Erendis, between his responsibilities. He's not ready to commit yet, as we've talked about. And so, but then one day while he's riding through the forests of the Westlands, he saw, as Tolkien says, a woman whose dark hair flowed in the wind, and about her was a green cloak clasped at the throat with a bright jewel. And he took her for one of the Eldar. So
real quick,
he's like, dang, this. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say real quick. Tolkien, yes, he has a love for nature, or he did. This is a very common occurrence. Beren and Luthien. Beren sees Luthien in the woods dancing and is completely placed in a trance. There's Aragorn and Arwen.
Yep.
I almost want to say there's Nimloth and who was that? Like the elves of Lothlorien before Galadriel came, Nimloth, and what was the
Nimloth
other one?
Affair.
Yeah. Either way, it's
Yeah.
just, it's a very common occurrence. I think Tolkien really likes the idea of a man stumbling across a woman in the woods and being blown away by her beauty.
Yeah, I guess so. But it is interesting, like the most, seemingly at least, like the most beautiful women in his that he describes, they all have very similar descriptions to his wife Edith.
That's true.
It seems.
Yep.
You know, that dark flowing hair and everything. So I think he's just putting her in everywhere, which is the most romantic thing you can do. You know, just etch her in paper, unending. But anyway, obviously he is taken aback. He is got the hots for whoever this woman is, but he recognizes the jewel and it's like, oh, I gave her that. Like, that's Erendis, perfect. Like, but as soon as he saw her, Tolkien says, then suddenly he knew in himself the love that he bore for her, and he felt the emptiness of his days, kind of realizing, like, man, what I've been doing without this person, like, it amounts to nothing. Like, I need her, I love her. And so he rides up next to her, and they spent time at Erendis' house, where he made it clear to her dad, Berengar, that he wanted to marry Erendis. And as exciting as this was for Erendis, there was still fear, because up to this point, I mean, this guy's left for Middle Earth and sailing multiple times already for years at a time. And so, you know, obviously there's reason for concern, because she's like an all or nothing woman. She was scared that Aldarion would choose the sea over her. Yet Tolkien says that Aldarion neglected the guild that he had started, the Guild of Venturers in the shipyards, and he didn't actually cut down any trees. He didn't fell any trees. He only planted trees. But with that, Aldarion wooed Erendis, as Tolkien says, in earnest, and wherever she went, he would go. So finally, they're kind of joined at the hips. I would say they're dating at this point, you know, and they're at the fresh stages. And he found more content in those days than any others of his life. Though, as Tolkien says, he did not know it until he looked back long after, when old age was upon him. So this is kind of foreshadowing what is to come a little bit. But in the moment, you know, it's that old Andy quote from The Office, like, I wish you knew about the good old days when you were with them. Or how does he put it? Like, I wish you knew about the good old days before they were gone, or I don't know, something like that. Wish you knew you were in the good old days before they were gone, I think is what he says. But anyway, that's kind of like what Tolkien is saying here is like, he's in the good old days right now, but he doesn't really know it until later. So they are sleeping.
It really describes well too, and it's even more strong after having kids. Just that life has so much more meaning when you're doing it with somebody you love. And Aldarion is consistently torn between his selfish love of the sea and the things that he's quite frankly like hardwired to do. Like it's in his DNA to be a mariner, to explore, like Sam mentioned, the adrenaline rush of, you know, fighting the sea and exploring new lands. Like, that's ingrained into him. But even that doesn't compare to the joy and the contentment that you can have when you're doing life with somebody you love. And unfortunately for Aldarion, he, like Sam mentioned, doesn't really notice that until later on when things have, you know, changed for him. But we'll get there eventually. So at this point, ultimately, Erendis decides to travel with Aldarion. He's basically, just like Sam said, wooing her in earnest and try to do everything that they can do together. So they decide to attend in Romena. So again, that's the far east haven where all the ships are. And so they're very well known mariners over there. The Feast of Valandil, I'd have to look exactly at the lineage. He is, I believe, one of the descendants of a sister of one of the kings, as opposed to a direct line. So he's of the royal line, but he's not of the ruling line. He's actually the line that now I'm drawing a blank. Isildur's dad, Elendil. He's of the line that Elendil eventually comes from. So he is royalty. He's akin to Aldarion here. And so he throws a massive feast and they're invited over there. And at this feast, he decided to drink and toast to Erendis because it's kind of becoming common knowledge that she's going to become Aldarion's wife eventually, hopefully. And he named her, and you're gonna have to bear with me, but he's feasting and toasting to her, and he names her Uinenel, daughter of Uinen, the new lady of the sea. And this is like in front of everybody at this massive feast. And Erendis is very stubborn, I guess would be a good way of phrasing it. She's brash in a certain term. She's not afraid of, a lot of women are rather reserved and work more in the shadows than, up front, but that's not Erendis. And she didn't like this at all. And she actually said aloud and came at Valandil, the host of this feast. And she said, "Call me by no such name. I am no daughter of Uinen. Rather, she is my foe." Oh, snap.
It's a Valar you're talking about right there. What are you?
Well, Uinen is Maiar, I believe.
Well, yeah,
right?
Maiar, sorry.
But yeah, I mean, just the idea that she would, it's kind of disrespectful and it's embarrassing to Aldarion. Like, Valandil is just toasting something that he thinks will make her happy. It's a thing of respect. We're welcoming you. I don't know, Sam, what do you think? Is she in the right to do that?
Probably more of like a one-on-one conversation afterwards. Be like, hey man, like, I appreciate it, but I don't, connect with that. Or, maybe that's a conversation about Aldarion on the way home. Like, I really didn't like how he did that. But at the same time, I mean, she's, like you said, she has no time to mess around. Let's get down to brass tacks. I'm letting you know how I feel pretty much at any moment. So,
yeah,
I don't know.
Well, and if you remember, we kind of briefly touched it, but Uinen is the most beloved Maiar of the people of Númenor because she, as Sam kind of alluded to, she restrains the wrath of Ase, who's her husband that causes all the storms in the sea and kind of goes crazy at times. And she's the one that they basically, the green bow of return, it's a beacon to Uinen to protect our ships. And so to come out and say that Uinen is her foe, it's more than just being rude to everybody at the feast. It's kind of disrespectful, and in theory,
it goes against their culture.
Yeah, it's completely against their culture. And in theory, Uinen has kept Aldarion safe during all of his travels, and so I don't know. I don't know. I definitely don't agree with how she handled it, but I also know that horse ride home afterwards, if she didn't say it, was going to be a fun conversation.
Probably still was anyway.
That's true. So after this feast, Erendis was still reluctant to agree to being betrothed and begged Aldarion to ride along with her and see the countryside. So she was okay to being betrothed. However, she was very wary because of her fear of losing Aldarion to the sea again, or to Uinen, as she kind of alluded to. And so she thinks that, hey, I'll show him all the lands of Númenor, ride with me, let's check everything out. You've spent so many of your years out on the sea and in Middle Earth, you don't even know the land that you're going to be ruling over. And she tries really hard to get him to, just follow her around and see the countryside. And there's a lot of really good dialogue, where they pretty much discuss where they would live, and Aldarion wants to live in Armenelos and have havens all over the place where he can get to his ships easily, and she's like, no, I love the fields and the pastures and the forests of my hometown and all these things. And ultimately, after all the dialogue, they just kind of decide that they can't come to an agreement at that time, and they ride in silence until they parted for that day. And so Erendis is actually,
I've been there a couple times.
Yeah.
Trying to come to a point with your significant other, and you're just like, okay, we're just gonna sit in silence. Who's gonna break first?
Yep. Those car rides are never fun, but ultimately, those are the hard conversations that have to happen.
Yeah.
And for them to pretend like, hey, this isn't a big deal. And not that things turn out well for them either way, but it's not good. And so actually Erendis she gets back home and she starts talking to her mom, and her mother Nunith, which, side note, I love that Tolkien gives names to her parents, because they're like not relevant characters at all. They just have a couple different words of dialogue or an offshoot note, but Tolkien has to name everybody. That's what he does. Yep. So her Very mother important. Nunith basically just urges Erendis. She basically says, like, just give in. You love this man. It's clear that you love this man, and he is a high man. He is going to be the king. Like, you don't screw this up, kid. And she looks at her and she says, all or nothing, so you were as a child. So, like, this is who she is. This is ingrained into Erendis, to just be stubborn and pig-headed and try to get her way. To be fair, though, she has some legitimate concerns as well. But her mom's like, don't fumble the bag just because of these concerns. But Erendis is...
Yeah, this is a retirement. Come on. Like,
I think they're doing pretty well on their own anyways, but...
probably.
Anyways, after some time, they were actually... Aldarion and Erendis were reunited during the I can never say these words. Erukirame. Basically, the new year. Erukime. Something like that.
Erukime.
Yeah. The the new year. The Númenorian New Year. And so after some discussion, Tolkien says that he being Aldarion, then kissed her on the eyes, and in that moment she put aside fear and accepted him, and their troth was plighted upon the steep path of the Middletarma. And so they're on the giant mountain, the Middletarma, in the middle of Númenor, and it's pretty, it's New Year's Day. It's a wonderful celebration, and I love the way he phrases that, just that in that moment she put aside fear. Like, that's a pretty cool statement.
Yeah, it's the one thing that's holding her back is the fear of, am I gonna lose him? Can I keep him? What's gonna happen? And she was just like, nah, all right, fine.
Yeah. Yep. And so in hearing this, Meneldor, who is the current king and Aldarion's father, he was just thrilled. He's like, finally. Finally. And he gives Erendis and her family a large portion of Amarie, the land that she was from, and he had a incredible White House built for her out there, which becomes relevant later on in the story. And so there was great happiness among the people of Númenor at this time, and this was, just for timeline's sake, this was 858 of the Second Age. So we could correlate that with what's going on in Middle-earth, but basically this is around the time when rumors of Sauron start kind of forming. And so although the people were happy, the people of Númenor, the parents of everybody's thrilled, the guild adventurers were quite discontent with Aldarion. He had been on land at this point now for 15 years, which for Aldarion has to be just absolute torture.
Eternity.
Yeah, it's got to feel like an absolute eternity for him. 15 years of being on land, and they were engaged for 3 years, and Aldarion finally felt the sea desire once more upon him, and he became at war with himself. So he's been engaged for 3 years, and Tolkien says that he turned and looked. What were you gonna say?
No, it's crazy. I mean, we were engaged for 13 months, and it was far too long. I can't imagine 3 years.
Well, and Meneldor actually says something to that effect. He's like,
he does.
He's like, 3 years is long enough, and I'm quite surprised you could wait this long. Like, there's some subtle like, how are you waiting this long? It's like, yeah, I get it. Yeah, 13 months. I think we were 7-8 months. Like, yeah, it's like, come on.
Nope. Come on, man, let's go.
Anyways, so at this point, Aldarion turned and looked back over the sea. A west wind was blowing, as often at that season. Sometimes Tolkien's writing is really hard to read aloud. Beloved by those who had a mind to sail to Middle-earth, and white crescent waves marched across towards the shore. Then suddenly the sea longing took him, and as though a great hand had laid on his throat, and his heart hammered, and his breath was stopped. So I don't know if you've ever felt something like that, where it just like stops you in your tracks, but he he just looks over out at the sea, and he's all of a sudden he's just reminded of what he doesn't have, and his whole life up until that, last 15 years comes rushing back. And so in the following days, Erendis actually picks up on this and notices that his eyes seemed to turn gray and cold, and she perceived that there was a longing in his gaze. So this is what she had feared. And they're not even married yet. They've been engaged for 3 years.
Yeah. And that whole, like a hand has been laid on his throat and his heart hammered and his breath was stopped. I experienced this when we went back to Colorado the first time after moving here. We just so happened, like, Ariel's family was doing a vacation thing up in their place in Breckenridge, and so they invited us to come up for a couple days while we were out. I think we were out for a wedding or something. I think it was a wedding I was doing, but we up there for a night and just gazing out at the mountains that we'd missed for the last 6 months or however long it had been since we moved. And it was that moment. It was like, oh man, was this the right choice? Like, my heart stopped. Like, the view was breathtaking. It was something that I'd gotten used to, obviously living in Colorado, but then being away from it for so long, looking around at the mountains of Breckenridge, and it was one of those, like, oh my gosh, everything is just, I'm at war with myself. And we actually had a long conversation, sitting on that deck and together, like, is this okay? Are we going to be okay? But thankfully we stuck it out and better for it. But yeah, I definitely understand that feeling for sure.
Yeah. I definitely can see where you're coming from with that. Like, we really kind of, we were in the mountains and you snowboarded a lot and we went hiking and all this stuff, but like, I don't think I appreciated the mountains enough. And every time we go back, I haven't had a chance to like go up into the mountains when we visited. It's been too busy, but just looking at them, it's like, oh, wow. And it's like, I miss that. I really do.
Absolutely. Well, back to the story. Aldarion, then, he's having this conversation with his dad because, obviously the dad's the king. He's a prince. They converse a lot, and he just is kind of honest with them. And he starts telling him about this struggle from, as Tolkien puts it, the fasting from the sea, which is an interesting term. You think of fasting biblically, at least, like it's taking food away, taking something necessary away from you, so that you can focus on something different, something better, Jesus, obviously, but you're taking something away that's necessary for your life to be sustained. And so for Tolkien to use this phrase as he's talking about his, desire for the sea, you can tell again just how big this struggle is for Aldarion. He's like, this is a necessary part of my life.
Yeah.
The sea sailing, it's necessary.
The sea is always right.
Don't even. Oh my god.
Sorry. Had to.
Brutal. Gosh. Rings of Prime. I thought it was. Ugh.
Anyways. My bad.
Gosh. You're good. I just got a bad taste in my mouth.
I know. I gotta wash that. Ugh.
Yeah, gotta take a drink some. But they're talking, and Manildor's pretty much like, dude, you're engaged. Like, things are different now. You can't just like up and leave whenever. But obviously, like Seth mentioned, he's the type of guy that many of us are, that when we get told to do something, we oftentimes do the opposite. And so, he gets up and he leaves the conversation with a lot of anger, and he pretty much is like, fine, but I'm just going to talk with my fiance about it. She was probably going to understand, rather than sit here and parley with you. He says, like, rather than bargaining with you, I'm going to go talk to Erendis about this. And so, he maybe confidently like walks up to Erendis, and they have this conversation about going out to sea. And he actually wants her to come with him. Like, that's the whole point of this. He sees his necessity for her and his love for her, and he doesn't want to lose that. And so he's actually inviting her on a journey with her. But to kind of back up what she had mentioned at that feast, she says that the sea hates her, which at this point, do we even know? Is there anything outside of just the tug that it has for Aldarion? Has there anything like in her past that has happened to her? Does she have any traumatic like stories with the sea?
Not that I'm aware of. I think it all comes down to she feels like she's competing for Aldarion's heart, and so she's demonized the sea. Yeah,
I guess that's what I was probably thinking too. But yeah, she's just very against it. So, and he begs her to come with him. And in his perspective, he's thinking, man, hey, this could be like a great honeymoon, would solve both of their problems because they get to be together, which is what her longing's for. They could be on the sea, which is what his longing is for. And, it'd be a great gift for both of them. He's not seeing it necessarily as like a selfish thing, even though it really is. But he's wanting to share something that he loves with his bride to be, which is what I try to do every time I tell Harry, hey, let's watch Lord of the Rings, but she responds very similarly to Erendis, and she's like, no, Lord of the Rings hates me because it takes me from you. Takes you from me. But anyway, so she finally was like, hey, you can go. Like, I'll let you go. But this time, let's not do 14 years. She's like,
let's not.
We've been engaged for 3 years. Like, we're gonna get married. Like, can you just like maybe a year, 2 years tops? Like, let's just keep it let's keep it brief. And Aldarion, surprisingly, was actually like cut to the heart by her words. And he was like, yeah, man, actually, I won't sail at all the rest of this year. And he because of the love that he has for her, again, he's torn in the middle. He's at war with himself. He loves his bride to be, but he also loves the sea. So even though he didn't sail the rest of that year, he had no peace or even any joy. It's just kind of a sucky way to live. He's just in this emptiness, as he talked about earlier. But finally, after a while of this tug and pull, he decides, okay, I'm going to set sail in the spring when the weather's a bit nicer. So he sets sail with 3 ships, and Erendis herself brings the bow of the great bow of Olare, I think Oilare, or however you want to pronounce it.
Oilare, something like that.
Oilare, yeah. And so she brings it to him, gives it to him, bids him farewell, and he takes off. And he departs on a 6-year-long voyage back to Middle Earth. And as it always happens to be, this voyage takes a lot longer than expected. Because when he gets to the haven of Iliolande, he realizes it had been totally ruined by some storms. And he's like, man, like this is the haven that I set up. I got to do something about it. But then also he was blown off course twice by the north winds, or coming from blown off course to the north from the winds that are coming from the south.
Yep.
But something else that's also going on, and this is something we can have a little bit of dialogue on while we have some time, but there's a growing fear of the men of Numenor by the men of Middle Earth. Like so he's at this haven and he's hearing all this like news and tidings and realizing like the Middle Earth men don't actually seem to like the Numenorians anymore. Actually, they're afraid of them. And he also hears this lord that hates the men of the ships, obviously referring to the Numenorians. This lord somewhere in Middle Earth hating the men of the ships. It's not explicit, but that sounds an awful lot like Sauron.
Yeah,
would you concur?
I would have to look exactly at the timeline. The book The Fall of Numenor is actually really good because it kind of goes through like the history in a chronological order, and it kind of goes back and forth between Numenor and how it correlates to what's going on in Middle Earth at the time. I'm not as fresh on that as I'd like to be, but yeah, this is like the rumor of Sauron starting off, and this is Sauron spreading lies and discontent and poisoning the minds of the people of Middle Earth. And you have to remember too, it's been 14 plus years. How long? No. It was 15 years since he had sailed, right? So, yeah. I mean, Numenorians live, forever. However, the people of Middle Earth are still 60, 70 years. So 15 years, yeah. That's a generation almost. And so sure. These people are becoming more of like a fable than somebody that, than people that visit and have been among them, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so obviously things in Middle Earth are shifting a little bit, causing a lot of like disconcern for Aldarion, who's again he still has in the back of his mind like, I'm going to be king of Numenor. I should have some kind of connection with Middle Earth and what's going on there. So
even though all of the kings prior didn't, he's basically the only one. Yeah.
Yeah, he desires that. I think maybe for some of the resources and some of obviously just the desire of going out and exploring. But yeah, he sees the need between the two connecting. But he decides to set back sail because he wants to go back to Erendis. But It was a really bad winter, and they got into just a really cold storm. And actually, the green bow of return was like started to wither and damage, which apparently doesn't happen.
No, it had
Like that's
never
not
happened.
supposed to
Yeah.
happen at all. Never happened before. But as Tolkien puts it, that could be kind of a foreshadowing of the relationship of Erendis and Aldarion. But eventually he finally makes it back through this really hard, cold winter, and everything like on the on the boat froze. The bow was damaged, like I mentioned. He comes back, he seeks out Erendis, and they kind of like start hanging out. They start talking, and and she's like one of those. I've heard it before from Ariel. I love her so much, and she's amazing. But you spend too much time podcasting, perhaps, or like, hey, what were you doing for so long that was so interesting that took you forever to get back to me? Is pretty much how she says it. But I'll
Right.
quote
Right.
Tolkien as we're supposed to. But she says, "Tell me of all your deeds. Much you must have seen and done in all these long years." Pretty much saying like, dude, you've been gone. Like you said, you weren't gonna be gone long, and here we are. You've been gone a long time.
It's a very
And
passive aggressive way of being like, all right, you got some explaining to do.
yes, exactly. And they talked back and forth, and I think at this point, Aldarion's a little worried. Like, do you still love me? Are you too mad at me? Can we fix this? And Erendis does assure him at the end of it, like, hey, my love for you hasn't grown cold. And they use the metaphor again of winter and spring. And so Aldarion replies saying, well, then let the spring and summer now begin. He's like, okay, cool, like we're good. You still love me, I still love you. All right, let's get back on with our merry and happy relationship. But then she responds, and this is very important. She says, and let not winter return.
Yikes.
Meaning, dude, don't leave again. Because without you here, it's winter, it's cold, it's dark, it's lonely. So let's just move on with spring and summer and never let winter return. But as we know, not really how the world works.
Not how Aldarion works either.
Right. To quote Boromir in a different universe, winter is coming. But he plays a character in Game of Thrones, and that's
that's right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I was like, what are you talking about? A different universe. Middle Earth is not a different universe. Got you. Right. A little slow on the uptake.
That's okay. I give you all the grace in the world right now.
Appreciate that.
But as is kind of foreshadowed, like spring and summer alludes to betrothal and nuptials, and so right now we need a pause. We've been talking for a while, and we're at that point where again we're going to need at least probably maybe 2 more episodes to get through this story. So we're going to pause right here, and next time we'll get to talk about the wedding of Aldarion and Erendis. Finally, they decide to actually tie the knot together, and we'll jump into that and all the things that happen after that, and maybe even talk about the little offspring that comes as well. But yeah. Any final thoughts, Seth, from this section of The Mariner's Wife?
Honestly, just we talked about it last podcast, but this story is really just the depth of it isn't in the lore or the the world building or the story itself. The depth of this story in particular is really the interpersonal between a man that is destined for 2 different lives and how he attempts to balance that. And I know that can be a huge struggle for a lot of people, between work-life balance, especially for men that are ingrained to work. That's what we're meant to do. We're meant to work. We're meant to provide. And a lot of people, I know military spouses, first responder spouses feel very similar to the way that Erendis is feeling. And it's not that what Aldarion is doing is bad. It's not. What he's doing in Middle Earth and exploring, and those are all good things. They're good for Númenor. They're good for Middle Earth. He's not doing anything wrong. But where he's going wrong is he's not committing or letting go. And that just continues to be a problem for him. And I know that I've struggled with that type of thing at certain points in my life where it's like, well, I want to pick up all this overtime because they're offering double time pay because they're so short staffed, and I can help out the unit. I can help them, and I can, help us financially because I can get paid twice as much for this shift. But then Amanda's at the end of her, at the end of her rope with 2 kids. And it's like, all right, I need to not pick up this extra overtime because the interpersonal between me and my wife is more important than a little bit of extra cash, or quite frankly, helping out my job. You know what I mean? And so I think what Aldarion's going through is something that's very relatable to a lot of people, a lot of men.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I feel it too. Just the other day, Tuesday, Ariel and I were having this conversation, and I had an event Tuesday night for the church that it was like an optional, like, it'd be nice if you could be here to support, but don't have to. And so we were planning on going, but then again, that was when she, like, right before she got strep, she was feeling bad, and Bear was not doing great, and she's like, man, I don't want to do anything tonight. And then I got a call, and I knew who was calling, but I was like, it's probably fine. So I silenced the phone, and we were talking, and I was trying to be present with her, but then I realized there was a message. So I listened to the message, and it was a parent of one of our students saying, hey, I don't know where my kid is. Like, she didn't show up where we normally meet to pick her up from school, and she doesn't have her phone. And she mentioned wanting to go to this event that you guys are planning. Like, is she that, like, so it was like one of those moments where I was like, I really do have to work. Like, I have to call her back. I have to start searching for this student. And, again, at that moment, Ariel's like, can you just help with Bear? And it was a hard, like,
you're torn in two.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. But the difference with me and Aldarion is I don't desire to necessarily work. I don't desire that as much as he desires this.
Sure.
Like, it's a little bit different in that sense, but there's still that tug of war, and I get it all the time. My phone goes off all the time with students or leaders or parents or staff members. I mean, there's just a lot of stuff that goes on, life that is not bound to the 9 to 5, and
right.
So yeah, it's a tough spot to be in, and maybe Tolkien felt that. Maybe that's why this was so easy for him to write. And I wonder too, as Christopher Tolkien is editing all this, how he perceived it. Maybe the subtle changes he maybe even made, as like seeing his dad as a professor and somebody who probably spent hours working when maybe he could have been playing with his kids, or I don't know. Maybe there's a lot of depth there that could be dove into, but I don't know.
Yeah,
it's a good story, so.
Yeah. Well, real quick before you do our outro, I was gonna say, after this story, Sam and I would love to dive into some like deep dives onto some lore that interests people. So if you're watching this, leave a YouTube comment, leave a review, email Sam your Tolkien story along with this, whatever it might be. But is there any type of lore or an artifact or some specific thing that anybody's curious about in any of Tolkien's world that we can dive into? I'm sure we can find something. There's always something for us to dive into. Just kind of thinking ahead, I'd be curious to see what people are actually interested in us kind of doing a deep dive in, like we have with the Mirror of Galadriel or the Houses of Healing or something like that.
Yeah. Honestly, I was thinking about like Mithril. I think that'd be cool to give an accurate account of that as opposed to the Rings of Power garbage that ensued. But yeah, absolutely. Like, let us know if there's something that you see in the movies or read in the books. You're like, why is that there? What's interesting about that? But I think, like I mentioned, we will have to cut it off here and continue on next time, whenever that may be. My life is about to be
yes, it is
thrown upside down, and Seth's is still busy as heck. So please give us grace as you listen. And again, just reach out. Let us know that you are listening so that it does get us motivated to continue to do this too. But with that, this is part of the podcast where we as Gondor break into the halls of Meduseld and shout, Gondor calls for aid. So will you, Rohan, answer? If you enjoy the podcast, please light a beacon of your own by sharing it with fellow friends and fans. Like, subscribe, leave a review, just like Scott did, my man. And if you'd like to share your Tolkien story, like Seth said, email us at wecpodcast@gmail.com. And as I mentioned, we're going to be jumping into the wedding of Aldarion and Erendis on our next podcast. But until then, we thank you for joining us for some well-earned comforts, and we bid you a very fond farewell. The sea is always right.